how much are these rogue states investing in international cybercrime, and how large are these operations that may be targeting Australia?
Well, so that's the challenge we face, is that we're dealing with a threat which has no, non-repudiation. In other words, it's very difficult to kind of tie things down. We've got research coming out tomorrow, for example, that talks about the threat group called Kimsuki, which is effectively kind of run under the North Korean government. So, but of course, our level of confidence is only moderate because we're only using technical indicators to do attribution. So in many cases, kind of pinpointing the exact kind of perpetrators behind it is a lot more difficult with, for example, using digital means as opposed to physical means.
You mentioned ransomware. I was just wondering for our viewers if you could provide a very brief description of ransomware, but also tell us if there are international groups or organisations that are specifically targeting Australia with ransomware.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So ransomware, like historically, was where criminals would hold your data hostage, and unless you paid a certain amount of money, then you weren't getting your data back. Now, they've kind of changed slightly, and they're stealing the data as well as holding the data hostage. Now, the average ransomware demand used to be around about $400. Most recently, there's been a case in which a company were purported to have paid $23 million to just get their data back. So this is enormous business.
In Australia, we have a rule that you can't pay cyber hackers once you have been hacked. Is that an effective strategy that sort of discourages that activity?
I think ultimately that penalises the victim. Because effectively, if you're at a hospital, for example, and, the doctors can't get access to your data, you're going to be like, well, look, just pay the ransom, wouldn't you? So I think a much better approach would be to start to address kind of proactive measures, kind of teaching and training businesses on what they need to do in order to protect themselves.
Are there any particular groups or industries or particular companies in particular sectors that may be of particular target for these international state-sponsored actors?
Yeah, so absolutely. So what we did was we actually analysed some of the biggest ransomware groups targeting Australia, and there are a number of them. And predominantly they're coming after the financial sector, they're coming after the government sector, the healthcare sector. So effectively, they are coming after organisations that they think are likely to pay. And in many cases, you have to argue, well, certainly, probably some of them are, maybe, and like those are the challenges that we face is we're dealing with an ecosystem in which criminals are effectively kind of targeting companies all across the globe and getting paid for it. And so they're going to continue.
I mentioned before about, Australia has a policy we can't pay cyber criminals once a company has been hacked. But is there anything else that the Australian government can do to protect Australian companies?
Well, so look, I think the Australian government are doing considerable amounts. I mean, I'm here in Canberra, for example, to come and speak to an international audience on cybersecurity. So there is a lot that's happening, but this is not an Australia issue, this is not a UK issue, this is a global challenge. And I think for me, the most important thing is working closely with the private sector, working with other law enforcement agencies, because the challenge becomes holding people accountable when they live in jurisdictions where we can't get access to. And so that becomes the challenge. It's almost a crime where criminals think that they're not going to get caught.
Yeah. Raj Samani, really appreciate you sparing some time for us in coming in. Thanks so much. Enjoy your time in Australia too.
Thank you, I will do.